you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We certainly appreciate you guys coming by the show today. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law, because, she's a wonderful person. You should refer her to the show. She'd like you more, maybe, if she heard all the wonderful authors and people we have on the show that bring such uplifting notifications, and then she might hate you less. Or not. Anyway, tell her to go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTokity, and ChrisVossFacebook.com. We have an amazing, prolific author on the show, multi-book author, I should say. John Katzenbach is on the show with us today. He's launching his newest series and book. It's called Jack Boys. It comes out May 28th, 2024, and it's going to be part of the Asset Lance Spector Thrillers book series. This is book 1 in the series. And, of course, if you know him, he's written a multitude of just amazing quality books, and people love him. That's what I hear on the Amazon reviews. People love him. John is the New York Times bestselling author of such novels as the Edgar Award nominated In the Heat of Summer, which was adapted for the screen as The Mean Season, The Traveler, Day of Reckoning, Just Cause, and Heart's War, which were also made into movies. The Shadow Man, another Edgar nominee, State of Mind, The Analyst, and The Madman's Tale. He's been a criminal court reporter for the Miami Herald and Miami News, and feature writer for the Herald's Tropic magazine. He lives in Western Massachusetts. Welcome to the show, John. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm fine. How are you out there?
I am great. Oh, yeah. They're calling to buy the book already. We just barely went on the air.
Hang on a second. Let me just get rid of that.
From H.A. Katzenbach.
There we go. Sorry.
No problem. There's a lot of calls coming in there.
There we go.
Just went live, man. They're calling you already.
What a modern world we live in.
Isn't it, though? Sounds like you still have a phone. That's kind of weird.
It's every so often you sort of embrace certain dinosaur aspects of life. Like still having a landline.
Yeah.
And a heating system that seems to work. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. My mom still has a landline. I think she finally gave up the AOL account about 10 years ago. But
I haven't.
You still have your AOL thing?
It's that wonderful ad where the guy held up the flip phone and said, "If it isn't broke, why would I switch it out?"
Sure.
And anyway, so like I say, I try to be modern in the books, but I have this deep, dark dinosaur soul.
There you go. It helps write good books, evidently. If it ain't broke, why fix it? That's what I said about my first 10 marriages and divorces. So give us a .com for you so people know where to find you on the interwebs.
Oh, it's just johnkatzenbach.com.
There you go.
And it's very, very simple, and you can find all my books at Amazon. You can find them at Blackstone, my new publisher. Hopefully you can find them in bookstores, but there aren't as many bookstores still standing out there.
Sure, that's true. We love bookstores, by the way. So give us a 30,000 overview. Your new book, Jack's Boys.
It's a simple premise. It came from the notion of, do you ever know what your teenagers are doing? Sorry about that. And
there you go. I mean,
do you ever know what that's my ex-teenager, my daughter calling.
Oh, maybe they're just trying to get to you out of your car's warranty.
Exactly. But anyway, the book is about a unique group of serial killers, 5 of them, who have formed what for lack of a better term, is a chat group, in the dark web. And where they feed off of each other's homicides.
Oh, wow.
And they have a sort of relationship with they like to model themselves in a modern way after Jack the Ripper. Mm-hmm. What happens is they're online one day talking to each other, and they get hacked by a pair of teenagers. Ooh. And the teenagers do what teenagers do, insult them. And fundamentally, what it is you've insulted the wrong people.
Yeah, definitely.
So they come after the teenagers to, quote, teach them a lesson. And it is how the teenagers and their family, extricate themselves from this rather significant dilemma. That's the book.
Wow. Do the teenagers know what they've gotten themselves into, that these guys are serial killers, or they find out later?
They have this image, but they react the way all teenagers do.
Yeah, they
don't believe anything.
Yeah.
What are you guys? Some kind of wannabe and in other words, what they say is enough to trigger a fairly substantial reaction on the part of these killers.
I can imagine. Yeah, you might want to. Yeah, I usually don't pick fights with serial killers.
You adults, Chris, we would keep our mouths shut.
Yeah. I don't pick fights with serial killers. That's a policy of mine. That's one of my policies I keep around.
Yeah.
Don't pick fights with serial killers, and don't pick fights with anybody. You never know who's who anywhere.
True enough.
Yeah.
True enough.
That's also something I have with my 10 ex-wives and divorces. So anyway, now this is part of a new series you're calling
not exactly. It's sort of part and parcel of a series of books that sort of deal with how best to put this, people having to take responsibility for actions that are imposed upon them. And we live in this world where it seems to me that we have responsibility is always a huge issue. Mm-hmm. And what I try to probe as an author and as a writer are those events that are where people have to seize their own, find their own answers. Mm-hmm. Instead of having them delivered to them.
Oh.
And that's the sort of foundation for any psychological thriller.
Mm-hmm. There you go. What made you come across this idea? What made you come up with this? Who hurt you?
Yeah, my wife periodically sort of asks me,
your wife
where
hurt
did you happen to learn about all this psychopathology? And I kind of said, it just sort of came to me. But the fact of the matter is when I was a journalist as a young man, I covered so many crimes and saw so much about what, for lack of a better term, is the dark side of human nature. And the way to process that for me was to become a novelist, to explore that stuff on the page.
Mm. There you go. So you're like, I'm going to just take this next level. Five serial killers getting together and forming a little union. That's quite unique. I mean, I don't think
I hope so. I hope so. In the literature in the literature about serial killers, there tend to be. I've never sort of read about anything like this. They tend to be. Sometimes you'll have a man and woman team, a couple of guys, but never a group that's so linked together the way these guys are. I named them all. You'll like this, I think. I named them all, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Those are also the names of my first ex-wife.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding, folks. I just work those jokes. So how many books do you have under your belt?
16 now.
16. Wow. And
it just makes me feel old. Yeah.
Oh, come on. I mean, you're not old, and still that's kind of young. We have people on that, 60 or 100 books. It's pretty crazy. They're pumping them out like it's going to style.
Chris, it's actually a good question you're posing, because there are certain writers, mystery writers, who are prolific at telling these stories, and I really admire the Lawrence Blocks of the world, and the guys who can write, who can follow a Jack Reacher or a Matt Scudder and do, because people think it's easy It is not.
It's not.
And you have to create a new circumstance for that character. And he has to develop in each new book. And I tell you, that's the kind of writing I admire those guys greatly.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Just writing a book on its own. I write business books, and I don't really have to make up characters and plots, and I just tell stupid stories from business. But what you guys do is a whole new level, because you have to character development, you have to plot lines and different under plot lines or entwining plot line, all that stuff, and it's hard. I can't imagine doing it. And
somebody. I got asked about this once, and I said, and I cited the great Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky, and he used to say that when he was in the prisoner camp, that the very worst torture they had was they would take you out in the middle of winter in Russia, freezing cold, and for the first 4 hours of the day, you would dig a hole, and then you'd stop, and you'd wait. And then for the next 4 hours of the day, you'd fill the hole back in.
Oh, geez.
And pretty soon, after a couple of days of this, you would go crazy. And sometimes I think that's what writing a novel is. You're just digging a hole and then filling it in. So I suppose in a way, there's a certain kind of craziness involved, and certainly it's kind of weird emotionally. When you're sitting there with 5 serial killers in a book, and you really like them.
Your wife keeps one eye open when she's sleeping with you at night, doesn't she? I can tell. Yeah. Yeah. She makes sure she keeps the knife in a private drawer where only she knows where it's at.
A fully cocked 9mm would probably.
Yeah, she's probably got one under her pillow at any
barbed wire around certain parts of the house. That razor wire usually.
Yeah. She's got 10 guns in every room and knows where they're all at. Had a moment's notice. Women are funny.
I'm actually very fortunate. My wife is was a journalist too, a Pulitzer Prize winner.
Oh wow!
And she's familiar with the craziness that is epidemic in the world.
There you go. Yeah, and sadly there are. I mean, you worked the Miami papers.
Yes.
You got the Florida man going on there. That must have been quite interesting.
When I was at the Herald, we used to play a game where we would make up a story and say, is this story going into the paper the next day? And the reality was, a lot of times nobody was making anything up. It was so crazy. And the game got ended finally when the famous criminal crime and punishment reporter Edna Buchanan came up with a story about a scuba diver who had found looking for lobster on the bottom of the ocean, and came up with a crab that had something in its claw. Mm-hmm. And in that claw turned out to be a finger with a ring on it.
Oh.
And she said they're arresting the guy whose wife that was. And nobody believed her. And that was, of course, on the front page of the paper the next day. Absolutely, word for word true. I mean, Miami was and remains to this day a place of extraordinary sort of craziness and yet wonderness too.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Yeah, Florida. I mean, just never-ending stories there of crazy. I mean, it's an interesting place. I think it's the humidity that makes people lose their minds there, maybe a little bit. My friend's in Key West right now, and he was talking about the humidity, and he's like, "It's really bad, Chris. It's even worse than just being in normal Florida."
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, all of South Florida. I once when I wrote Just Cause, which was also filmed, I had a paragraph where I described it was as if America got tipped up on an axis like this, and all the really crazy people just sort of flooded into Florida, just rolled right in. Which pretty much Ted Bundy proved that to be true.
Pretty much, yeah. And then he went to Utah, so he moved the crazy from Florida, Utah. So there you go. On the book, what more can you tease out? We can't usually give away too much in the middle and the end, of course, 'cause it's a novel.
Yeah, happily. The main characters are, of course, the 5 serial killers and these 2 very rebellious teenagers, and the boy and a girl. And the boy lives with his grandparents, one of whom is a Vietnam vet with his own sort of very, very dicey history, and a grandmother who's a ER and ICU nurse. And what happens is, how do you balance as a writer? How do you balance these people? How do you find within them the means to confront and deal with these killers that enter their lives? And what was for me most challenging, and as you can imagine, was getting into the heads not just of the killers, but of teenagers, so that their behavior rings true. And teenagers cruising around the dark web, was something that was interesting for me to explore.
Yeah. So was it hard to get in touch with your old teenagedom sort of mindset?
I would say I'd use the word challenging, but that doesn't quite capture it.
Yeah.
It was you just desperately, as an author, do not want somebody to say, that can't be, that's not how they would act as a teenager or whatnot. And so I was very careful to make sure that I played the right psychological chords for those kids in this book.
Definitely. You gotta make sure you stay true to that sort of nature.
Teenagers, one minute they're smart as hell, and the next minute, they do something cosmically stupid. And that was what I was trying to capture.
There you go. So it'll be fun to check out this book. I'll be interested to see what other twisted "who hurt you" concepts she'll come up with in the future. This one's pretty unique. I mean, serial killers are bad enough when they're on their own and coming up with their very dark ideas. But if they're going to get together and start comparing notes and trying to one up each other, I mean, that doesn't sound like a fun world to live in. So I don't.
The interesting thing, Chris, on this was, as you can imagine, was that they are Jack's boys. And if you think about Jack the Ripper back in 1880s, what did he do, really? He manipulated the press. He taunted the police. He made everyone in an entire, section of London, Whitechapel, terrified. In other words, he was a template for the kind of thinking that is, it's not that unusual today. And they're exploring that relationship between them, the new guys and this, the person they hold in so much esteem in history was exciting for me as a writer to do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the plot of this book turns out and how you go through everything. So definitely people want to pick up the book. Give us your final pitch out to people to order it up, and .com as we go on to the show.
Final pitch. Chris, I never thought that a job title was influencer, and that I could ever do anything like that. But what I would say is this, is that it's important to find books that aspire to originality. And I really believe that this book is both exciting and has an original take on some very, some aspects of life that people will find familiar.
There you go. 5 serial killers hanging out. Sounds pretty normal.
Yeah.
John, give us your .com, I think, as we go out.
As I said, is just, johnkatzenbach.com, and, books, the books are available in every kind of, format. And that's, that's what people should see. People can hunt them down. I think readers are readers are pretty clever, at finding where authors, exist.
Be sure to hunt down those serial killer books, eh? And it'll be fun. Please come back for your next book. We'd love to have you, and hopefully by then I'll have been through therapy over the nightmares I'll get from this book.
Chris, I would suggest that reading the book alone will be enough therapy for you for a long time.
Okay, that's why I listen to Metallica. It's therapy. Yeah. So thank you very much, John, for coming to the show. We really enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
There you go.
Absolutely.
And thanks, audience, for tuning in. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold. Stay away from those alleyway bookstores because they might have serial killers in them waiting for you. The book is entitled Jack's Boys. It comes out May. I'm sorry, what?
Tell you, that's what it looks like.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, we got a shot there. Jack's Boys, out May 28th, 2024. And now you can start calling John again on his landline phone because he's off the show.
Absolutely.
So there you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, and all that jazz. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.